Mr. President. Submission of the revised Federal Government of Nigeria 2020 to 2022 medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper and revised appropriation bill 2020. It is with great pleasure that I submit the revised 2020 to 2022 medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper and the revised appropriation bill 2020 for the kind consideration and approval of the House of Representatives. Let me seize this opportunity to express my deep gratitude for the patriotism, cooperation, and support of the leadership and honorable members of the House of Representatives in our collective efforts to amend the Appropriation Act 2020 and accelerate its implementation. It has become necessary to revise the 2020-2022 MTEF FSP and amend the Appropriation Act 2020 in view of the sharp decline in crude oil prices and the cut in Nigeria's crude oil production quota occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic. In effect, the assumptions underlying the 2020 Appropriation Act are no longer sustainable. It is also imperative to adjust expected revenues considering the widespread disruptions in other domestic economic activities as well as international trade and transportation due to the measures implemented across the world to curtail the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. Furthermore, it is necessary to reallocate resources in the Appropriation Act 2020 to ensure effective implementation of required emergency measures and other actions necessary to mitigate the negative socioeconomic effects of COVID-19 pandemic. Accordingly, I hereby forward as Appendix 1 and Appendix 2 respectively, being the revised 2020 to 2022 MTEF FSP and the revised Appropriation Bill 2020. Given the urgency of the requested amendments, I seek the cooperation of the National Assembly for expeditious legislative action on these submissions. Please accept, Mr. Speaker, the assurances of my highest consideration. Yours sincerely, Muhammadu Buhari. The second letter from Mr. President reads thus: request for approval for external borrowing to finance the proposed revised 2020 budget, 2, for priority projects of the federal government, and 3, for projects to support the state governments. In accordance with the provisions of Section 21 of the Debt Management Office Establishment Act 2003 and Section 41 of the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007, I wish to request the approval of the House of Representatives of the Federal Republic of Nigeria for external borrowing to finance the following: A, the draft revised 2020 budget; B, priority projects of the federal government of Nigeria; and C, projects to support the state governments. As the House of Representatives may be aware, the COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in economic and fiscal challenges for many countries. Nigeria has also been affected in this regard, especially with the lower demand for crude oil, which has affected our sales, and the sharp decline in the price of oil below $25 per barrel, which is much lower than the $57 per barrel benchmark in the 2020 Appropriation Act. The COVID-19 pandemic has also created the need for an additional expenditure in the health sector. All of these have necessitated a review of the 2020 budget and the medium-term expenditure framework 2020 to 2022. Following from paragraph 2, the draft revised budget proposed by the executive for 2020 has a higher deficit. In order to finance this deficit, the federal government is planning to raise funds from both domestic and external sources. For the external component, the government is negotiating with multilateral institutions for funding on concessionary terms. The facilities totaling $5.513 billion being arranged in this regard as detailed in Table 1. International Monetary Fund, $3.4 billion. The World Bank, $1.5 billion. African Development Bank, $500 million. Islamic Development Bank, $113 million, totaling $5.513 billion. Priority projects of the federal government. In addition to the financing required for the revised 2020 budget, financing is also required for some priority projects of the federal government to address the COVID-19 pandemic and improve Nigeria's food security. The proposed loans and associated projects in this regard are detailed in Table 2. Lender, Islamic Development Bank, project support of Nigeria's response to challenges posed by COVID-19, amount $600 million. 2. Lender, African Development Bank, project strengthening of healthcare system to improve response to COVID-19, amount $125 billion. $125 million, I'm sorry. Financing smallholder farmers to mitigate food security impact of COVID-19, $23 million. 3. African Export-Import Bank, project, provision of critical medical supplies to combat COVID-19, amount $500 million. 4. Export-Import Bank of Brazil, project, Green Imperative to enhance mechanization of agriculture and agro-processing in Nigeria, amount €995 million. Facilities for projects to support state governments. The state governments are also experiencing fiscal challenges as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And in order to support the states, facilities from the World Bank are being negotiated as detailed in Table 3. 1. The lender, World Bank, project State Fiscal Transparency, Accountability and Sustainability Program to provide fiscal support for the states, amount $500 million. 2. The World Bank, project COVID-19 Action Recovery and Economic Stimulus Program to support state-level efforts to protect livelihoods, ensure food security, and stimulate economic activity. Amount $500 million. Whilst looking forward to your timely consideration and approval, please accept, Mr. Speaker, the assurance of my high regards. Yours sincerely, Muhammadu Buhari.